Welcome to the Salt and Mirrors and Cats podcast, interviews and audio dramas from our literary zine with stories, poems, and art about superstitions. Dear superstitionists, welcome to episode 2 of the Salt and Mirrors and Cats podcast, where we are sharing tales of superstition and exclusive interviews with our team, along with 4 mystery guest writers to be revealed very soon. In today's episode, you'll hear from co-founder Signe Maene and her story, The Haunted, with voice acting by Chris Gregory. But first, a short interview with Signe. Joanna asks,
Signe, what does superstition mean to you?
I am one of those people who will walk on their ladders, and I always thought that I wasn't very superstitious at all. But when I started working on the zine with Joanna, I started to realize that I am much more superstitious than I initially thought I was. While I still walk on the ladders, there are certain small things that I do in the hopes that it might send some good luck my way. Some of these things are extremely silly, like vacuum cleaning my flat every time before I go outside, because I believe that will repel my third biggest fear, which are spiders. I have also recently started to wear a pendant, but I only wear it when I need good luck. Wearing it for any other reason would certainly mean that it would lose its magical abilities and that bad luck would be looming over me. And that is essentially what superstition means to me. It's about people, what their fears are, their hopes, and their dreams.
What was the inspiration behind your story?
I love dark stories, and the inspiration behind my story is quite ghastly and gruesome. In the 15th century, the bailiff of Antwerp was presented with a macabre case. 3 women had gone to gallows fields and had stolen the hands and the head of a thief. They buried the head and one of the hands underneath the threshold and boiled the other hand in vinegar, after which they sprinkled this decoction around the house. It was believed that the body parts of hanged criminals contained powerful magic and would bring good luck and protect the home against evil spirits who might want to enter. There were several more cases in Flanders where body parts of hanged criminals were kept as lucky charms, and while you might expect that sentences in cases like this would be very severe, the punishment was usually lenient, and those convicted had to go either on a pilgrimage, pay a fine, or they were banished. After the 16th century, cases like this seem to disappear. But it's a superstition that continued to exist, as even in the 19th century it was recorded that some sailors had the bones of criminals in their pockets to bring them good luck while they were away at sea. Before we listen to my story, I would like to thank the multi-talented Kyria Seabrook, who is doing a fantastic job presenting and making these podcasts. I would also like to thank Chris Gregory for reading my story. He has a brilliant podcast of his own with lots of folklore content called Alternative Stories, so do check that out if you haven't already done so. And last but not least, I would like to thank one of our supporters, Michael Teles. Michael, thank you so much for everything you have done to turn Salt and Mirrors and Cats into a reality.
My eyes suddenly opened when the voices of 2 women sounded louder than the howls of the grumbling wind. I felt as if I couldn't be seen, and without knowing why, I wanted to hide behind a row of linden trees that divided the grassy field in 2. But my body seemed to have only broken bones, as if a horned winged creature had dragged me to the fires of hell while I had been sleeping, and even moving my fingers seemed like an impossible task. "Can you smell it?" one of the women asked. "What do you think? If it weren't for this horrible stench, we would never find our way in this torturous darkness." Ah, torture. It was Hasa. Surely I didn't need to hide for Hasa. If the sun beamed brightly, the birds chattered merrily, and all of the flowers around her were in bloom, she would still find something torturous. But even if she hadn't used that word, I would have known it to be her voice, and the gruff voice that preceded it could only belong to her sister, Duna. Duna had once said she would force-feed me hemlock after I stumbled into her while holding a candle. I asked her forgiveness the next day by giving her a fine, velvety rose, but she accused me of having tried to set her hair on fire, ripped the petals off and proceeded to throw them into the ditch with all the theatrics she could summon. No, Duna wasn't someone you wanted around. But that's when I started to notice that Hasa's soul shone just as brightly as her blonde braided hair did in the sunlight, although she thought the sun was quite torturous. I wanted to chuckle when I thought of her habit of hopping through the woods, wearing a sombre, grave face as she picked blueberries and red currants, and her futile efforts to disguise the smell of wood-fire smoke that crawled into her clothing with rosemary, but my muscles remained motionless. "Will you hurry up? I'm not doing this, Duna. This isn't right. Hasa, you've been screaming doom all week. He's haunting you, and soon he will start to hunt you, and then he will kill you. I'll do this if it means I don't have to hear your voice anymore." "Will you keep your voice down?" Hasa said, as I wondered who they were talking about. She was mine, and I would butcher anyone who came near her. No soothsayer needed to predict my future because I already knew that Hasa and I would leave foul-smelling Antwerp and move to a farm where we would watch the moon rise in a starless sky and ponder what happens in the dark unknown after a hard day's work. I could already see the moths fluttering around us and hear foxes scurrying near the henhouse as they tried to sneak in the hopes of leaving a trail of blood and feathers behind them. I wanted to continue seeing our children rolling in the dirt and catching tadpoles in the stream, but was brought back to the present when a sharp pain entered my leg. "Roll that pestiferous swine down the hill," Duna said. Hasa was standing so close now that I could feel her warm, sweet breath caressing my neck, and the dream of us being brought together seemed more real than the agony in my leg. "Are you sure he's death? I mean, I know he is, but what if he isn't?" she said. "You've just stabbed him," Duna said. "If he could skin you alive, he would already have done so." "Death? What do you mean, death? Death? I can't be death. Neither heaven nor hell looks like a piece of grassland riddled with ants, beetles and weevils underneath a sky where foreboding clouds gather." I wanted to scream. I wanted to make Hasa's fear come true and tear into the women's flesh, claw into their skin to make them feel that I'm alive, breathing, that all that's wrong with me is temporary paralysis, that I could be healed. And for a moment I had hope when my lips opened, but hope disappeared again when all that would leave them was a maggot. "Have you looked at him?" Hasa said. "We can't drag him back to Antwerp. Do I have to do everything myself? Grab his feet, They hauled me over the field. I wanted to screech when my head collided with a rock, but I couldn't even bite my own tongue. Just when I became convinced that they were going to drag me around the countryside until I was indeed death, they stopped, hid me behind a row of bushes, and threw themselves exhausted in the grass. Hasse got up and stroked my cheeks with the steel of a knife, while staring into my eyes. She looked as if she was either going to gouge them out or kiss them. She did neither. "You have the spell," she said to her sister. "Spirits of the night, listen to the words I speak. Take his soul and set it alight. Scatter his ashes under mysterious moonlight. Trap his dreams and what had once lived in his heart behind a dark veil where no light may reach. Vor nu, vor altschid." "I hope it worked," Hasse said. "You bought it from a witch who has more enemies than there are rats sleeping in her bed, and there are many." Hasse didn't need to worry. A cloud of vapour left my body and ascended into the dark night sky, but my past hopes remained in the shape I could hardly recognise on the ground. Only terror and vengeance travelled with me. My spirit floated over the field, and while the sisters had hoped to see a fiery spectacle, there was none. For the first time I saw where I was. Gallows Field. A place I wouldn't have dared to enter in my most terrible of night terrors. But I realised now that I must have set foot in it during my waking hours, and that a noose had been tied around my neck. I looked down at what once had been me, now nothing more than a corpse, with the marks the rope had left clearly visible. The bruises and abrasions had turned into a nasty black colour, while a stab wound maimed my leg, and all I could do was watch. Watch as Hasse sliced my throat and made several attempts to hack off my head before Duna scolded her and removed my head in one fell swoop with a small farm axe. Now I understood what it meant to have good luck. God knows I didn't have any during life, but at least I didn't have to feel the sisters desecrating my body. All I had to do was watch, helplessly, as they mistreated my corpse. The sun, a magnificent sun that chanted red golden songs of autumn, rose in the sky as they wrapped my head in a black blanket and put it in a jute sack. They covered what remained of me with leaves and branches, but even I could see that the leaves would soon be beckoned to follow the wind, and that their sacrilege would not remain hidden for long. Hasse complained about how torturous the weight of the jute sack was as they left the field. I wasn't sure whether to walk with them or stay with the hanged, wondering if they too could still feel, hear and smell. But then I remembered Hasse's biggest fear, being haunted, hunted, killed by a death man. They walked quickly along the Scheldt, as criminals do when they're on the run, but not too quickly, because their crime was too fresh to fear being chased. The city had already woken up when they passed the imposing fortress that scrutinised everyone who dared to venture inside. And as they arrived in the narrow streets of Antwerp, fragments of my life returned to me. I remembered my days as a robber, enjoying the look of terror in the eyes of hapless souls as I held a knife against their throats. I remembered my days as a ruffian, starting fights in inns as a ruse to run off with the valuables of drunkards. But most of all, I remembered burying Hasse underneath a pile of stolen gifts, and the wry smiles with which she accepted them. The sister's house wasn't one of the timber houses that were rotting away in unison with the other homes in the street, but a stone one, and the only house where a horseshoe graced the front door. I remained at the windows while they entered the room. Rags were hanging above the fireplace, and bowls that contained thick, muddy substances were scattered across the floor. My head was thrown into a pot of boiling water, to which vinegar had been added. My eyes, the eyes that had stared once too often into Hassa's bewitching but hardened eyes, and had watched her as she went from the baker to the fishmonger to the tailor, turned red and started to melt away. A strange smell started to engulf the streets as my head turned into a soft, pulpy paste, but with all the unusual smells that so often took the Antwerpians by surprise, no one lifted an eyebrow. They took the pot off the fire and dipped vials into the sickening yellow-coloured water. The women sprinkled the water in which my head had shrivelled away near the windows and door entrances with the words, "O evil spirits that lurk in the corners of this house, hear me. The blood of a thief is now protecting these walls. Return to the darkness where you were born and never visit us again." "You see, that wasn't so bad," Duna said. "Maybe he didn't mind," Hassa said. He had a very different definition of evil compared to what those priests in church always tell us. And then I remembered the stories. The stories that say the body parts of a criminal will keep evil spirits at bay. And then I knew that while I walked this earth as a spirit who could not be seen or heard, there was only one thing left for me to do. Haunt them. Haunt those that had haunted my corpse.
Thank you for listening to the Salt and Mirrors and Cats podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Seabrook. The story you heard today was The Haunted by Signe Maene, with voice acting by Chris Gregory. To find out more about the authors and voice actors in this episode, please see the links in our show notes. We would also like to express once more our gratitude to everyone who contributed to our fundraiser. Salt and Mirrors and Cats. We'll share the good luck.